Are we live?
We are, Chair, yeah.
Okay, well, good evening, colleagues and officers, and welcome to our first executive meeting of West Northamptonshire Council, albeit still in the shadow period. And I think this will probably also be our last meeting in the Zoom format, unless something dramatic happens in terms of the change to the regulations. But so far, I've not heard or seen anything to think that those regulations will not come to an end on the 7th of May. So we'll move straight into item 1, which is apologies for non-attendance. Paul?
I haven't received any apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Any notifications to address the meeting?
Yes, Chair, we do. Councillor Wendy Randall has asked to address the meeting on various items, but I can't see that she's joined yet.
Did see her join now, yeah. She's
oh,
on
okay.
The call.
No, you're right. Yes, she is there. Apologies.
Yeah, okay. Any others?
No other notifications to address and none from members of the public, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And members' declarations of interest. I wish to declare interest in item 8, the item on Spawn School. My daughter is a student at Spawn School. Anna?
Sorry, yes. Also to declare the same interest. My son is a student as well at Spawn School. Thank you, Chair.
Any others? So the minutes of the meeting were held. They're very lengthy and very detailed. I don't propose to go through all the page numbers, but has anybody got anything to comment on the minutes? If so, just let us know what page. I did go through them. They were, I thought, very comprehensive. So thank you for that. So is it your wish that we approve those as a true and accurate record?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. So that is agreed. Announcements. I don't have any formal announcements, but as this is our first meeting, can I just thank Anna and Jane and the whole team who've actually managed to get us to this point. There might have been the odd teething issue, but I think so far the transition from our former districts, boroughs and county to West Northants has been extremely smooth. And I think luckily for most of us, no one has actually noticed too much happening. So that's probably exactly the way we wanted it. Vesting day was a bit of an anticlimax, but again, probably the ideal plan to have it as a bit of an anticlimax. So I'm pleased to where we are, but I do appreciate there's a little bit of a holding pattern at the moment until we get small matter of the elections out of the way, and then in a month's time we'll be all raring to go. A month's time today will be the annual meeting of council. Item 6 then, future Northants closure report. Jane.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So hopefully everybody has a copy of the report in front of them. I'm bringing this today to bring you the closure report from the programme. Obviously, we've brought you various updates on the local government reform programme all the way through, and this is the final report, just closing everything down. If I can work my way through it, then I'll open it up to questions, whenever you're ready, Chair. So I'm happy. It's quite a long report, so I'm not sure whether people want to ask as they're going along or not.
Let's try to do them at the end if we can.
That's fine. Okay, so just starting with the vision and mission. This was the original point that we were trying to get to, so we set out for ourselves. So to create the 2 best performing local authorities in the country. Obviously, we hope that we're into day 21, I think, of that vision. We won't know for a little while whether they're the best performing, but that's where we hope to get to. And then the mission was the future Northants programme team would put their heart and soul into serving the citizens of Northamptonshire by designing, planning and implementing services that are safe and legal day one, which I'm pleased to say we did. And we've still got a lot of transformation and aspiration that will be delivered at the forefront of our minds. And we want to enable the 2 unitary councils to deliver their vision by 2024. So that was the start point. If you move on to the next slide, please. So just as a reminder, many moons ago, we started with a number of original portfolios, which you'll see on this slide, and each of the sovereign chief execs at that point took the lead role as SRO on these original portfolios. So you can see there all of the areas that you probably remember from back then, and each person was focused on one of those areas. We then had the unenviable task of being hit with the pandemic and having to deliver local government reform in that pandemic. If you can move on to the next slide, please, Paul. Okay, and so that, because COVID pandemic had hit, it led to a programme reset. What this meant is that a number of the resources that were on the programme at that time had to be moved into COVID response because of the levels of impact that we were seeing on the services, and both in the need to respond to our communities during that period. So the programme was reset. Originally, when we had a year extension, it was due to be focused on transformation. When COVID hit, that had to adjust, and we had to go into a more safe and legal approach with some plus, with transformation moved to April 2021 and beyond. Okay, so that graph there is just showing you where the changes happened and the lead up to vesting day and the expectation beyond that. Okay, if you can move on to the next slide, please. So what we put in place at that point was a revised governance structure. So you can see there right at the very top, the North and West shadow authorities, and underneath those, the shadow executives. So you can see the West from there. There was also the joint implementation executive that was put into place there, and the programme implementation board, which were officers and members led, just so that we could bring items through on a joint basis before they came to shadow execs. And underneath that sat the new work streams that were reset, who each had their own SRO, slightly different from the ones before, but more in line with the actual skills and expertise needed for those particular specific areas. And it was refocused to get legal services for day one, safe and legal transfers to make sure services we provided were continued right through, so that nobody noticed in terms of the public any difference between when we started and when we moved through that vesting day. And transformation, we were looking at that point at doing a plus element of that. Unfortunately, as we got towards the end of the year and it was still continuing, COVID was continuing, and we got the second wave of COVID, that transformation plus element had to be reviewed again, and we moved into purely safe and legal, which is what we headed towards for vesting day. You can move to the next slide, please. So as you can see, there's some absolutely key milestones that we were aiming for on the roadmap here. So the structural changes order was the very first point at May 20, and then also in May 20 we wanted to start the appointment of the interim statutory posts. The inaugural shadow authorities and shadow executive meetings started to be held from June 20, and in July 20 the appointment of the permanent heads of paid service. So at that point Anna Earnshaw was appointed into our chief exec role. September 20 was the appointment of the permanent section 151s and MOs. And in November 20, the Children's Trust was launched, which was a massive milestone for us, and a huge achievement for both North and West at that point. We then moved into March 21, if you can see there, both unitary constitutions were approved. Again, another huge milestone, and both unitary budgets approved on a balanced basis, which was phenomenal. And then we're moving into May 21 of the elections there, as you can see, which is the next step for us. Okay, if you can move on to the next one. This slide really lays out some of the major achievements that were made during this process. So the creation of the Children's Trust, we have to look at the things that we've achieved during this in the scope of the other things we were doing. So to actually do the disaggregation of a county council, the aggregation of district and borough councils alongside a pandemic and the creation of a children's trust is not something that's ever been attempted before. So we've done it as a first, and something we should congratulate ourselves on achieving. But the creation of the Children's Trust and the creation of 2 brand new unitary councils has been achieved. In amongst that, we also repatriated LGSS back office services in. and repatriated highways client functions back in. So we didn't do things on a small way, we did things in a large way, but we made sure that we achieved them. And then the investment in people, commitment to use the in-house staff to achieve the programme outcomes was fulfilled. We did bring in 1 or 2 consultants in specialist areas where we didn't have the skills, but the majority of staff we used were in-house staff and who developed new skills. And in fact, a number of them are being retained in the transformation team. So we achieved the Tier 3 1-to-3 recruitment, and we also restructured the FN programme into new transformation teams from the 1st of April. So all of that's been achieved. And then the full disaggregation of NCC workforce, so into North and West. So just to say, obviously, some of those workforces also still in lead and hosted arrangements, which we were working towards, working through those hosted arrangements over the next 12 to 18 months. And that's in a plan as we go forward. Completion of inter-authority agreements for lead authority and hosted services was done. Still a little bit more work to be done on those, as you'll see from the slides going forward, but the majority of the agreements were done ahead of time. We just need to now look at some of the more additional details, such as budget information. And then a clear plan for disaggregation of hosted services. We have a timeline agreed through the task and finish groups of those, which we will be bringing a report to the next meeting to show those. And then 8,000 contracts transferred from sovereign councils to new bodies. So again, no mean feat. ICT, so MS365 rollout across 8 separate councils to 7,000 staff. 1 or 2 teething problems, but given the scale, a really big achievement. Eclipse for both new unitary councils, adult social care, and the Children's Trust is still going, and that will be finalised in June this year. ERP Gold for both new unitaries and Children's Trust for 7,000 staff, and then Capita and Education moved to council with a go live of May. 2 brand new websites, although the sovereign websites are still behind those, there is a 2-year plan to completely transition that, and then 2 brand new intranet sites as well. So really big achievements made. Move to the next slide, please, Paul. Okay, so this is more of the detail on each of the programme work streams. So all of the critical deliverables were achieved, and so the big ones for adults that just want to draw your attention to: CQC registration. Number of things that we had to do to achieve that, including interviews with the 2 DASs on either side. So all of that was completed and we were registered and able to operate from the 1st of April. 3 new instances of systems needed for the safe adult social care services were delivered, and despite the issues we had with Eclipse, that was all overcome and Plan A was achieved. And then both adult social care and public health are able to operate safe and legally from day 1. All huge achievements again. A few actions to be carried over. We just got a couple there to build on the adult social care target operating model, because there was a great job done by adult social care starting their transformation journey. That's a long way through and will continue over this side, but that's in hand. And then we need to complete the implementation of 2 new instances of Signum from the short-term interim arrangement at the moment, which is needed for the safe running of adult social care services. And then implementing the Adult Safeguarding Board and the Health and Wellbeing Board are still the next stages to do. And then there's a few actions there to be picked up by the new councils, but all of those have been handed to services where needed. Can you move to the next one, please, Paul? Again, children's services. All critical deliverables were achieved for day 1. Creation of the Children's Trust and also creation of the Intelligent Client Function, which is the relationship holder between the council and the Children's Trust, who does the monitoring, but also it's a very supportive function in working on how we commission together, how we work together, and how we transform together and improve together. So that keeps that really big link between the 2. Disaggregation of 10 service areas within the retained education function, creation of Shadow Schools Forum, and the 2P transfer of all staff cohort in maintained schools where NCC is the employer. So some really big achievements there. Couple of things, well, there's a few things to be carried over. All of those have been handed over, and in fact, a couple of those have been completed already. And then we've still got some more disaggregation to do, but that's built into the hosted services timeline. Can you move to the next one, please? Okay, so corporate programme, this was a huge programme, and as we know, probably in terms of critical deliverables, this was the one that had the most towards the end, and the most that was to the wire, because a number of them we couldn't do either legally until the last day or day one, or they required lots and lots of input from various people who were already tied up in other things, and we had to create the space for them to be able to do that. So huge achievements in this area. All the statutory officers recruited, both on the interim and then the permanent positions. Recruiting remained, sorry, we've got a couple of things. Recruiting remained of tier 1 to 3, but most of the tier 1 to 3 roles have all been recruited now. 2 new constitutions for each authority. So the West Constitution has been through the governance, as you're well aware, and executed the 2P consultation across all 8 authorities. The inter-authority agreements are created. There is a little bit more work that needs to be done on those in terms of adding some budget information and some of that key performance indicator information, but that is all underway, and both Martin and Kath are working on those at the moment to finalise that information. 2 new logos, which you all saw and inputted to, and overarching data sharing agreement between the authorities, and the schedules for services were put in place. So those are the main things really that I want to. The other thing just draw your attention to is work with ERP to ensure the payroll system is in place, and we parallel run that. The first pay day is on the 23rd. We're confident that the parallel pay run, when everything works, then we will sort out if there's any short-term issues on that day, but we have mitigations in place just in case there are any issues that occur during that time. And then a couple of other actions to be carried over, which is around the inter-authority agreements and the detail that I just talked about as well. Okay, so if you can move on to the next one, please. Customer and digital program. So again, all safe and legal critical deliverables were completed. This was further ahead probably than the other programs that are completed early. New websites and e-forms all in place. Website policies, cookies, and all the content publication was in place. New single non-geographic telephone numbers, which again, you all had input to. Standardised opening hours across the north and west, and email automation to route the emails from one place to another. That's probably where we had the most issues in terms of the vesting day, but they were quickly solved, and the response was really good in the day one system that we had in place to sort those out. New IVR interactive voice response, and some of you may be part of the judging where we opened that up to staff to engage with them, and it's 2 staff members' voice that you'll hear on those, both the north and the west, that were picked through a judging process, and staff really enjoyed that. There was a lot of interest and a lot of engagement with them in that. And then actions to be carried over. So probably the main one is delivering the 2 new websites fully. At the moment, we still have the Sovereign Council websites, which have been rebranded, but we're rerouting to information on those. Over the next couple of years, we need to move from those, decommission those, and have it all on those 2 individual websites, West and North. So that's where we're at. And that will be action we have to take with the North to make sure that it's all done at the same time. So I'll move on to the next one. So the ICT programme, you can see based there that all the critical deliverables again were completed, and a number of systems that we created 2 instances for. Main ones, Eclipse, ERP Gold, Land and Property Gazetteers, and the Income Management System. So those are all key systems for us. 2 new MS365 tenancies, which you've seen in action through your own elements, and 2 new intranets were in place. They actually aren't intranet, they're obviously fully functional now. And then we've got a couple of actions to continue on with. So Capita education systems, we couldn't do until this side because of online admissions. And one of the things we said is that we would not make any changes which would impact on customer service or the services that customers were receiving during key periods. So that's why we moved that one over. And then for every area, we've got to do the target operating model and the strategy for each area as well. Okay, so I'll move on to the next slide, please. And the finance programme, so a number of things were harmonised that you'll have seen come through the governance, including council tax support schemes, council tax schemes, the NNDR business rate scheme, and then the NNDR rate relief policy was set, discretionary housing payment policy was set, and the pensions admin authority was identified and transferred to Northamptonshire West. And again, the scheme of delegation for pensions was designed and agreed. So those are the key things. And balanced budget, that's absolutely one of the key things, nearly missed it, is in place for both councils and agreed, which was a really big achievement from the finance team. And just a couple of things to carry over there. So implementation of D&B month-end reporting, and obviously the closure of final accounts for sovereign councils is a key one that's being worked on at the moment. Next slide, please. Sorry, next one from that. that's the North programme. So yep. So and finally, the Place West programme. We have all of the critical deliverables again were completed. So by now you should have worked out that we had 0 critical deliverables left to deliver on by the final day, although some of them were delivered on the final day. And then we have the policies agreed. So waste management policy agreed for West, harmonised enforcement policy agreed, which you would have seen come through the governance again. Dynamic purchasing system in place for commissioning transport services, and operating procedures and systems to support the registration service were implemented, and the asset register was completed. So a couple of actions to be carried over. Fleet management, we didn't quite get a solution in place, so we've just working on that at the moment. It was still with the fire service up until the end of April, but we're on track to replace that with an alternative from there. And then the building access card rebranding is going along. I'm sure a number of you will have seen that you have new ID cards and new lanyards, etc., but there's still some work to be done on some of those. And then one of the key ones to be picked up, which we've got a project going on at the moment, is the housing application system integration for the West. So we just need to bring that together. It's all the same system, but we just need them to be able to talk to each other at this point. Okay, so, and the disaggregation of hosted services is a running theme. So I'm going to pause there, Chair, before we move on to finance, for if you want to ask for any questions.
Well, before we bring in Cabinet colleagues, I see Wendy has raised her hand. Wendy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there was just a few questions that I'd like answering, please. I'm just interested to know how the harmonisation of the 3 councils are working. I'm sure you'll agree that the staff working on the ground are the ones that will be coming across any obstacles. I wondered if they've been asked if they have any concerns, if there's an avenue for them to feed into and share with colleagues, and not only their colleagues within their existing councils, but across the 3 councils. You know, there's little things really, I think. Obviously, they all work differently to start with, and now they're being pulled together. Even things like debt recovery, you know, different things like that. I just wondered how it's all linking together. And then the other thing, this is just a little thing, is there a list for councillors for contacts? I've never been a county councillor, and obviously now I've got casework coming in that picks up the old county council issues. And I don't.
I think we just lost you there at the end, but the principal thing about having a list has been certainly circulated, I think, at least twice now, but we can circulate it again. I'm sure I circulated it with the newsletter a couple of weeks ago, but I'll do it again on Friday to make sure that we're getting those out. I saw Anna. I think, Wendy, you might have frozen, but dropped your connection. Anna?
Yeah, sorry, Joe, I was just going to make that point. We sent out a newsletter not that long ago that had a list of all of the areas of responsibility and all the AD's email addresses so that they could be contacted. On the staff question, I'm sure Jane will pick it up too, but we've done a number of live sessions with staff, had up to 1,000 staff join the calls in each case, which has been pretty good, to feedback, you know, any concerns and things they had. I think probably, as you'd imagine, in most cases, there were practical questions about how they did things. A lot of interest in whether we were going to be changing the offices and the head office and what the plans were, which of course is something that hasn't been decided yet. But generally, they were the more practical things. Obviously, there's a huge piece of work on Jane's radar and on our transformation radar to then start working as kind of a West Northants Council and single services and do that aggregation and common ways of working and processes. But I mean, generally, there's been really positive feedback and some really good messages about how much people are enjoying meeting each other and some of the new networks and staff networks we've set up. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I've certainly been in a couple of offices, and I'd say that that accords with my thinking. So I don't see any other hands up. Wendy said, sorry, your internet cut out. Yep, we noticed. The Cabinet colleagues, have you any comments on this? No. I just personally, again, if you go back to that slide that actually shows the sort of key deliverables and all the things that we actually did, I do think the whole team that delivered that should be congratulated, because any one of those things, setting up a children's trust, carrying on with the recovery program, dealing with COVID, disentangling yourself from the LGSS arrangements, setting up new arrangements to deal with some of those things. Each of them could have been and would have been normally seen as a big project that would have had its own timeline, and we'd have been happy to have dealt with them as that. And also, in particular, South Northants, they had a pre-step before all of this, which was disentangling itself from Cherwell, which again would have been seen as a big project. And we've done all of these things concurrently and simultaneously and all at once, and brought them in to one final finish point, being the 31st of March, 1st of April, just gone. So I think, if anybody underestimates the size of the task that we had in front of us, and I just think it's a remarkable achievement, and we do have to congratulate everybody everywhere who's contributed to that, because we have achieved an awful lot, and it's easy to sometimes forget just the amount of ground that we've had to cover, and in the background that we've had to cover it in. So I certainly think if we've managed to do that, the starting position is bound to see us well into the future. And as much as we'll be able to say, well, look, we faced all these challenges before we became a thing, we're bound to be able to face whatever else life has to throw at us in the coming months and years. So I'm particularly happy, and it's wonderful to see all of those individual program areas, workstream areas, all with a row of green lights, and particularly on the budgets and particularly on the risks, that we didn't manage to go over budget, and we didn't manage to bring in a whole load of very risky areas that we could have ended up with not being safe and legal. So Anna and everybody on the call, I won't single out names, because I know if I do that, I'll miss someone, I'll get in trouble then with them. Anna and all of the team, just please pass back once again on behalf of all the members and cabinet members our thanks for a good job, well done thus far. And then so we're now at the end of the beginning, and we can now move forward, I think, with a reasonably good platform and a good springboard. One of the things, I'm not sure where it was on there, was at sort of 5 minutes to midnight, we actually had EY sign off some of the accounts, which will also help in terms of, that'll help the cascade and remove that roadblock from the older historic accounts that had querying, to now allow us to get to our properly audited opening positions. I suspect, hopefully, we'll be able to do that in this financial year when we get round to the 2021 audit. So a remarkable achievement, and I'm very grateful to everybody for their efforts. So we've got no other questions on that. We've been asked to note the report. Hang on, let me check my.
There's no recommendations, Chair.
Yes, no recommendations. We're just being asked to note the report. So I'll say that we have the report is duly noted, and we'll move on. Where we are now with finance. Sorry, is this Martin's slide, or?
Yes, Chair.
Jane, are you going to talk about this?
That's me, Chair. So the information you've got here relates to the financial year that's just closed, 2020-2021. And on the face of it, it shows an underspend of 2.824 million. But we mustn't get too excited about that, because we will need to carry that forward into the new financial year, because there are commitments still which need to be delivered against that underspend that was shown in 2020-21. I think, to give you the context, so this year shouldn't be considered in isolation. It needs to be in the context of the overall programme. So the context of the overall programme is the total expenditure for the programme was 53.3 million. The savings anticipated to come from the programme was 84.4 million. And that was over the years 2019 right up to 2024. When we start breaking down the individual years, like you've got here, it can show a particular underspend or overspend in a particular year. So this is showing 2.8 million underspend. What we need to do is we need to carry all of that money forward, because there will be continued commitments against that spend If we look at the overall programme, which is what we need to be looking at really, we at this point in time are saying the expenditure is we're still expecting that to be 53.3 million. We are still expecting the savings to be 84.4 million. But we are reviewing all of those. We're doing a root and branch review on all of those budgets just to make sure we're happy with all of that. But in terms of looking at this, it's dangerous looking at this slide in isolation, because that on the face of it shows 2.8 million underspend, but actually it's just primarily because we've had slippage. So some of that expenditure will now take place in 2021-22. So this funding will need to be carried forward to actually fund that.
Okay. Any questions? I note your caution, Martin. So we can't have a party, is what you're saying.
That's right.
Fair enough. This is just a profiling issue then, where the spend is going to happen as the curtain falls on a particular period. Any questions? I don't see any hands up. So we will just, again, we're just noting the financial position. So we'll just note the financial position, and so the next slide is where we are now. Is this back to you, Jane?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So as you can tell, some of this paperwork is done before we actually get to the dates, because it has to be published and we have to go through them there. But we are, where it says we're on track, obviously you're all fully aware now that we have delivered a safe and legal on vesting day. Actually quite minimal issues on the day, given the size of the programme and given the pressure of all the other things that were going on at the time. So, you know, the credit to everybody that was involved is absolutely right, because they worked tirelessly to make sure that happened. And that's both the programme and the service experts themselves that were involved in that process. So, this was back when we had critical deliverables remaining. We still have, like I say, when we got to the end of the time on 31st of March, we had no critical deliverables remaining, so that was all delivered. The day one success plan was our response to initial issues that were happening. Most of the issues were, as we expected, internal. There was a couple of small ones in the north around telephone lines early on that customers would have experienced, but those were rectified. But the customer line in the west didn't do the same thing as it did in the north, so ours continued as normal. And it also meant that we responded to any internal issues, mainly individual email addresses or joint mailboxes where there were a couple of issues, and they were responded to quickly and dealt with as soon after, so that people had access to the things that they needed. ICT worked tirelessly on that day to resolve those issues quickly, and so a huge thank you to that team as well that really did that. The financial position, as you can see, it gives you the position of where we are, what's been delivered so far, and what we're on track to deliver this year, and the 36 million to be delivered with post-vesting day that obviously we have profiled into the years that Martin just discussed. And we have a full day two list and robust plans in place for delivery. The transition to services for the business as usual items of that has already happened. So they now have hold of all of those items and are working through them. Some of them will be done within a month or so. Some of them will take a little bit longer. For example, things like rebranding everything that we have. One of the agreements we made with certain category items with members is that we would only do them as needed, and for some of those items we would wait until we ran out of some stock of stuff that it was internal, so that we could make sure we placed it after that. And transformation task and finish groups draft timelines have been prepared, and as I said, a report will be coming to the next meeting to show the agreement hosted, and we had a session with the North to make agreement with regards to those hosted services, because obviously we have to be aligned in order to deliver that disaggregation work. So that's from there. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, and did you say me?
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to echo the comments you made to say, acknowledge and thank everybody for the amazing job they did in getting us over the line. And then obviously to move on, that the task now is all about delivering the savings we need to this year, the transformation work, which should go on for years really. And as Jane referred to, I actually chaired the two task and finish groups, joint North and West together. We had quite a constructive meeting as I read it, talking about the where we had some differences of opinion in terms of priorities, but we had a good outcome from that, and hopefully we're going to get that report, as Jane said, to come to us quite soon. So well done to everybody. But I guess the message for us all, as I'm sure we're well aware, is the work starts now to carry on delivering the transformation we needed to put the councils in the best shape we possibly can as we move forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. So I think that's where we're at then with that item, the closure report. So we can move on now to item 7, the West Northamptonshire policy adoption, LGPS pensions discretionary policy, and that was a late circulated item, but it has been sent. Anna, as this is a pretty technical report, do you just want to jump straight in on it?
So I can take this report.
Yeah, fair enough.
This is to do with pensions discretion. So we need to have a pension discretions policy. When a new organisation comes along, you're expected to have one in place within 3 months of that new organisation coming along. We're in the process of formalising that at the moment, or formatting that at the moment, and we need to go out to consultation, for example, with the unions to make them aware of the types of pension discretions we're looking at. So that will come back to full council in June, that finished document. In the meantime, if there are any pensions discretions which people want to apply for, particularly upon termination of employment, we need an approach in place where they can be determined. So this report is simply saying to delegate that authority to Anna to consider those pensions discretions. If any of them come along in the meantime between now and when the actual policy is considered and hopefully agreed by full council in June. So that's the purpose of the report, Chair.
Thank you. Lizzie?
Yeah, hi Martin. Can you just, for my own clarity, give me an example of how this fits in? You said about termination of employment. Can you just expand on that for me? What exactly you're talking about in terms of that pension discretion?
Yeah, so there are lots of different pensions discretions that come into play here, and some of them are mandatory and some of them are discretionary, and we have to publish our policy on all of that. So if I give you an example of some of them, and they're wide ranging. So for example, applications for flexible retirement, and if you're going to reduce somebody's pension as a result of flexible retirement, the amount of redundancy paid to actually pay individuals, and whether you should apply the weekly amount rather than the statutory amount. So there's just a couple of examples. So and there's 43 in total that will form this overall policy. We will have, the predecessor authorities will have these discretions in place already. Mm-hmm. When we looked at them across the piece, they're very similar, but there are some slight differences, and it's just working through those slight differences. I think it's important to say that just because the discretion exists, it doesn't mean that we always approve that discretion. So when we go through the policy and when we look at predecessor policies, actually the discretionary policy says we will not apply this discretion, for example. So it isn't saying that every discretion is actually considered and approved. We don't fetter our discretion, but quite often the policy will say we will not, in ordinary circumstances, apply this discretion. But there's a few examples of the types of discretions that make up some of those 43 discretions that we have available to us.
And if it's a significant sum, then you bring it to the Cabinet West Exec.
And that would be part of the consideration. So if any of these examples came forward, we're seeking delegated authority to Anna for her to consider those. But obviously, as part of that, we would consider the impact on the finances and if it was affordable and all of those things. And if there's a budgetary issue, then yes, we would have to bring it back to the executive. If we could fund it through existing budgets, then we wouldn't have to do that, but affordability would be part of the consideration.
Yeah, I think I read that. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Adam, you put your hand up and took it down. Are you happy?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other comments or any other hands up. So this particular report, and I'll move the recommendations that the shadow executive delegate to the chief executive as head of Pen Service all relevant pension discretions to exercise if necessary on an interim basis, and to ask the Chief Executive to draw up a pensions discretions policy to present it to a future meeting. Are we agreed? Any
Agreed.
against? That is carried. Thank you. Item 8, proposal to forward fund extension improvement works at Spawn School in Toaster. Fiona, you're going to do this one. I wasn't sure it was going to be you or Adam, as it was 106, but yeah, Fiona.
Okay. Thank you very much. This report sets out to explain the capital improvement works that Spawn School wish to undertake, and also to show how this is to be funded once approved. In the past, Spawn School did have an increase in their PAN, which is their pupil admission number, in case you don't know, to help us to accommodate the many local children as possible, because Toaster have a large development taking place at the moment, and this is increasing the number of young people that wish to go to a secondary school, and it is the only one in the area. This particular extension will not increase the pupil intake further, but 2 Septembers ago, they agreed to take an extra 22 pupils, which, if you bear in mind, next September will actually be an extra 66 pupils, taking 22 in each September. And they are finding it a little tight in the school to accommodate all of these young people and give them the best education possible. So what they want to do is to build a new science block so that the science area that they've got currently can be expanded into the school and used for other things. It's quite laid out quite well in the papers, I think, how it's all going to be funded. Some from monies that we already have on their behalf from 106, which is actually named for Spawn School, so can't be used anywhere else at all. Some which will be due, if not already paid, imminently. They do have a rather sort of elaborate plan for the future, but that will not be coming under our remit at all. There is a limit to how much 106 contribution there is going towards this school, and that will be the end of our contribution to their funding. So how they fund future developments will be for them to find out, because we have firmly said that this will be the end of our contribution. So it's quite well laid out. To approve the final tranche of the S106 funding from Toaster South of 1,296,776 to Spawn School. Approve the release of the 182,942 that's historic that South Northants held in their bank and has now been transferred to the West, and to release all of those contributions to the school. To delegate responsibility to the Executive Director of Children's Services in consultation with the Executive Director of Finance and the relevant portfolio holder to consider and determine Spawn School's request to forward fund a further £322,282 of capital improvement works at the school to allow the extension of the school science block against value of future 106 funding to be received. And I think you'll see in the papers, it's quite clearly laid out how that will be arrived at, and we are very confident, everybody has looked at this very thoroughly, that those monies will be coming forward and it will not be a cost to us as an authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Before I bring Cabinet colleagues in, Wendy, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I'll leave my camera off this time and hope that my internet doesn't cut out. I note the amount of money required for the school to expand, and effectively the loan which is needed of £320,282. But I'm just curious to know that if a school needs a developer's contribution to extend, where will the money come from to build a school in Daventry, which Spawn School are going to run, when a school isn't needed in Daventry, as we've already got hundreds of spaces available within our 2 schools? And if we did need a school, why were we looking at expanding our existing 2 schools, one which is now a good school and the other one were due to become good? You know, you're not looking at building a new school in the Toaster area, quite happy to, use developer contribution to extend it. So I just wondered what the difference was between there and Daventry. Thank you.
Well, this is about are we releasing S106 monies to Spawn School? It can only go to Spawn School. Any questions about how Spawn and their Academy Trust are funding any potential new ones in Daventry are really questions for them and not for us. Thank you. Lizzie.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ian. Wendy poses an interesting question, actually, because the bigger issue is with Spawn is whether the current site is going to be big enough. But that isn't the question I was going to ask, actually. But it is an interesting question, Wendy. Right, the phase 1 science block expansion. You've got a new staff faculty office. Now, bearing in mind that's going to happen in phase 1, and I'm sure there's an explanation for it, but maybe Fiona, you might know, one of your colleagues. Why would you put that above all of the other requirements when they're desperate for the space in the first place? It isn't the staff that need the space, it's the children. So why have they prioritised that first?
They've prioritised that because they currently have staff space in the rest of the buildings that they have at the moment, and they want to integrate that for young people's space, so the staff are having to move out of there into a new accommodation. Not because they're getting priority, but because it suits better for the space that the staff have currently within the school to be used by the pupils.
It doesn't actually say that. It says 3 new science laboratories, and then it goes on to say a new staff faculty office. All as I'm questioning here is they're desperate, aren't they, for space? We all know that. Why they prioritised a faculty office for staff when it's the children that need the space? Why can't that come at a later date? That was all. It's probably not for you, Fiona. It's probably more of a technical development issue, but it does seem a bit odd in terms of.
I think what Fiona's saying is that'll free up teaching space or pupil space by doing that.
No, that's not what it says. No, that's not
what
it says.
That's not what that says, but that's what Fiona
No, but
said.
that is what is in the plan. They're big plans which they sent us. That they've got a very grandiose plan for the whole of the school in the future, which goes into many more millions than we're going to give them. But that was in that original plan, that the space that the staff currently use within the building would become part of the area that they would use for students. So therefore the staff would move out.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's like there's obviously a communication issue because it doesn't actually say that at all, but we'll leave it there. It actually saying it's creating more space, but we'll leave that one. But I do think it's an interesting one. So do you think in the future there will be for extra expansion, because we know we're going to have a massive increase, don't we, in terms of secondary requirements, secondary school requirements? Do you think with this and the future plans that they're going to have enough on this site? Because we always talked about a different site, didn't we?
They have got plans to increase quite a big way. I'm not sure at the moment how that will be funded. That will be a further conversation to have with them. But there are some stages of which I think came out to everybody in their brochure that was sent round. Various stages of development that they're putting forward to go to a price that we certainly wouldn't be supporting. So I don't know how they're going to fund that at the moment, but that's not our concern, because our 106 contribution, I think, does end at around 6 million. So once we've had that money in, which I think goes over about 5-6 years, that will be the end of the contribution that we're able to give them. But they will probably apply for Department of Education funding for other things, or they can get a loan to build. All sorts of options open to them. But the Department of Education do fund the schools. They will be funding the one in Daventry.
Thank you, Fiona. Richard, and then Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? I've had some problems with my microphone. Thank you. Yeah, it's just to correct Councillor Randall. She didn't tell the whole story. The school is required in Daventry. That's from the Department of Education and also projected going forward. And at the moment, well, the last report I saw when this school was proposed in Daventry, we were busing over 1,000 children out of Daventry to schools further into the county and out of county. So by improving the educational officer in Daventry with this new school, we hope to attract some of those children back to Daventry. I think it's totally unacceptable that they have to bus their children out of Daventry to find the educational offer they desire. So the school is needed. We were very excited about it, and we look forward to generations benefiting from that educational offer going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. I don't want to get into a Toaster versus Daventry schooling thing. This is about the Toaster 106 response. So, Adam?
Yeah, with apologies to you, Chair, following that comment. Fiona's already made the point very well that funding for the new school in Daventry is coming from the Department for Education. Councillor Randall really should be aware of that fact. It's been in papers that have come before DDC when that body existed. You know, education and the future provision of school places for children is a very serious grown-up matter. I think it's something that requires more than simple knee-jerk opposition. You know, people need to be reading all of the information put before them. Clearly, Councillor Randall hasn't in this case, and that's concerning.
I'm going to raise a very strong objection to the tone of that comment. I think it's completely unacceptable. Thank
you, Danielle. I don't think we should be just shouting across here. You know, everybody's had their chance.
I won't have it. Totally unnecessary.
Sorry.
Can I just say, Ian, just to defend myself, that I went far beyond the reports that came to council. And I know this is a Daventry thing, but this is children's education that we're talking about. I went far beyond those reports. What Councillor Brown and Councillor Auger have said is not true. There is no longer 1,000 children leaving the town. I went to the schools, I found out the information, I went to county council, I found out information, and I can categorically assure you that if county council had the money and was building a school, Daventry would be the last place they'd be building one, because they have got schools all around the county that are absolutely bursting at the seams. That is not the case for Daventry. The education is good. 97% of residents in Daventry said they do not want a school on our green space.
Okay, well, you've made your point. I'm just very keen to make sure that we're not getting into this versus them. The paper tonight is around releasing funds that have been secured from the Toaster South Development via Section 106. It can only go to Spawn School, and that's where I want to keep it at the moment. I'm sure we'll return to education provision in Daventry and education provision across the West in the fullness of time, but this is about keeping ourselves to the item, which is the extent the funding and releasing the funding to Toaster. Has any other colleagues got anything else to say on this report? So Fiona has proposed the recommendations. I don't propose to go through them a second time. So we're approving the first tranche and approve this of another 182,000 and to delegate the further funding of 320,000 of capital improvement work. So are we agreed on the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Any against? That is carried. Thank you. So on to item 9, holiday activity and food programme. The general exception rule has been applied to this one. So, who's introducing this report? My notes say
I think it's me.
Matt.
Sorry, Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So this is the holiday activity and food programme paper we have before us this afternoon or this evening. So back on the 8th of November 2020, government announced that the holiday activities and food programme will be expanded across the whole of England in 2021 following a couple of pilots. And I'm sure we'll all concur that research that has shown that school holidays can be particular pressure points for some families. So the government released a tranche of funding for the whole of the county, I'm being interrupted. For the whole of the county, which amounted to over £2 million to cover the three main holiday periods, which was Easter, summer, and the winter holidays. And of course, we've obviously gone past Easter, and that's the activities that were put together, I understand, had to be all done virtually, but there was some excellent material put together, and I've seen some of the supporting material that was fronted by Kathy and Lucy, and it talks about things like the wheel of well-being and keeping a healthy mind during 2021, given all the pressures that we're under. So I think the programme was launched really well. So the paper today talks about obviously the future moving forward for the summer and winter 2021. The aims of the programme is to focus on reducing obesity in line with the outcomes, the public health outcomes that we'd already sort of signed up to: reducing obesity, improving physical activity levels, improving emotional well-being and mental health. Obviously, this cuts into children's services, and so public health have been working very closely with children's services. Obviously, also with the North Council as well, because the funding was for the whole of the county, and instead of disaggregating it, it's allocated as per the school meal, free school meal qualification. So, of course, it's appreciated evidence that outcomes are better for children and young people who engage in organised, semi-structured holiday activity. There's been some referencing, going back and looking at how an evaluation how the first programme over Easter went, and they're going to try and make sure it's as, we can improve on it and make it better. As you referenced at the start, Chair, hopefully the next set of programmes can be done more face-to-face, and I'm sure I did see the whole offer, and there's some really good programmes there from Pilates, Zumba, healthy cooking alongs, all sorts of things that I'm not overly familiar with, but should really help to add value to the target group and the families that need them. So I'm happy to present the report in line with the recommendations. I won't read them out, but they're there on the paper to Cabinet this evening, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So again, Fiona, do you want to say anything by way of introduction before we get into the debate?
I just wanted to point out that all of these activities and meals will be no cost at all to our children, who generally get free school meal vouchers, but the activities will be open to other young people in the areas to come along if they wish to, but they will have to pay for their entries themselves. But our children will have free entry and free meals.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. So before I invite other Cabinet colleagues to comment, I got Danielle and then Wendy. Danielle, you're still on mute.
Thank you very much. Any contribution that engages our young people and offers them food and activities is very, very welcome indeed. So I'm really pleased we've got a proposal on the table. It does occur to me, though, that the amount of money is really not very much, is it? It's not a generous amount of money. So I'm a bit worried about how it's actually going to be delivered. And I'm curious about who is doing the delivery and where the delivery is. Are we using school premises during the holidays, or what? Who's going to be doing the actual delivery? The other thing I'm really concerned about is we know the children who are entitled to free school meals. Not all the children take it up. So will the children, will this offer be made to all children with the entitlement, or the children who take up the offer, is one question. The other question is, we know, and it's been highlighted during the pandemic, that we have a huge issue with poverty amongst children of working families, so the working poor. And it seems to me that they are at great risk of being excluded from this programme because, of course, they won't be able to afford to pay to come into it. So I'm just wondering what's going to be happening about that, because those children are just as much in need as children who are on benefits and entitled to free school meals. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to comment on the practicalities of running the schemes? I'm not sure there's great.
I'm just wondering, Ian, if
Sorry,
Lucy, I think Lucy and Kathy are on the call, whether they could comment on those.
Yeah,
Thank
Kathy,
you.
Lucy.
Shall I start and then Kathy can add?
Go on.
So because we are only given 8 weeks to actually mobilise this programme after notification of the fact that the funding was becoming available and that the programme was to be extended, the Easter programme had to be directly awarded. So we did engage with some organisations that we were aware had delivered this in some of the pilot areas, and we actually ended up employing an organisation called SSG, who basically oversaw and coordinated the programme for Easter, but utilised Northamptonshire Sport and other voluntary sector organisations for the actual delivery. So because they had experience of running it, we felt obviously they could learn from the pilots that they'd run, but also would guarantee that it got delivered in time locally. We are already starting the procurement process for the 2 larger holiday allocations, and we will be tendering that formally through the obviously appropriate procurement process. So we don't know who will be providing that going forward, but that direct award was because of the time frame. It was primarily delivered virtually because of the pandemic, but we were very conscious of the safeguarding issues, particularly with some of these more vulnerable families and children. So that is obviously a learning point and a factor in the delivery going forward. But it was open to all children who were eligible, not just those that were claiming. Kath, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, in terms of targeting, obviously it went through the schools to actually target those young people and families who were on receipt of free school meals. And obviously what I think we need is the analysis from the first Easter tranche to actually identify whether we did actually meet that target audience and what the uptake was. And from that, actually look at how can we readjust the programme. And so we absolutely, we do that. So as Lucy says, it was very short timescales in which we had to award for Easter. But what we will be using Easter is what's the analysis from that and the outcomes, and then looking at how we can readjust the programme to make sure that we do actually target, further target those young people and the challenges around that. It's heavily supported by the DfE and expectations from the DfE in terms of how the programmes are managed nationally, and obviously we will be feeding that back in through to the DfE as well. If the challenge, there are challenges around that, because it will be challenges not just for us but also other local other authorities. And I think the analysis will be very interesting. I know the uptake was very good. And we just need to get more feedback in terms of how it was delivered and those children and families that picked it up. So we share your concerns, and through the analysis we hopefully will be able to review that.
Thank you. I'll be really interested to see the analysis, and I would also like to be invited to visit one of the programmes if that's okay.
Wendy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've been speaking to schools in my local area, and obviously they already do deliver this service through the holidays without any funding. They know all the children, they know who are the vulnerable ones, they know who are under social services. So to me, if a school is already delivering this service without funding, and boy, they do need funding, why on earth would you just not automatically just go straight to the schools? Why would you use any outside people? The police link in with it, everybody that makes contact with those children is in with that school setting. The parents are comfortable sending the children into a school setting. The teachers and staff know those children already I've seen different activities over the years run through holidays, and I've gone along to them. And sometimes there's only like half a dozen children on an estate where there might be 400 children. So, you know, to me, school is the place for it to be delivered. And that's, you know, that's where I would like to see it delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Lizzie?
Very quick question, Kathy. In terms of the transport to get to the location, do we provide extra transport?
No, we don't. And we've already raised that as an issue, because obviously, especially in the West, there's a lot of schools in rural areas. So again, that will be part of the analysis. So we worked quite hard in ensuring that the providers were able to take the activities to those young people. But equally, as Lucy said, this was during COVID, and so a lot of the activities were virtual.
Yeah, okay.
But it is an area that we will keep our eye on through the analysis, because we understand that absolutely.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't see any other hands up from Cabinet colleagues. So the recommendations are that we note the direct award for the Easter programme, approve the related 1.8 million grant for the coordination of the 21 summer and winter school holiday activity programme, and procure the HAF service in line with the National Council guidelines. Approve the passporting with resources to Public Health Northants, which is hosted by our colleagues in the North. And note that we're mirroring the government funding distribution methodology. And agree delegated authority to Director of Public Health in consultation with Director of Children's Services. So that's Lucy and Kathy, along with the Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing and Cabinet Member for Children's Services. That'll be Matt and Fiona, to agree the procurement, management and delivery arrangements for the service. Are we all agreed? Any against? That is carried. Thank you. Item 10, matters stand referred from the Shadow Authority. There are none. Item 11, exempt items. There are none. Item 12, urgent items. I have none. Just check with the Chief Executive and the Monitoring Officer. You have none either? Okay, fine. So that concludes our agenda. So at 8 minutes past 7, I shall close the meeting. Wish you all a pleasant remainder of your day and a happy, sorry.
Very quick one. When's the next meeting? Yeah, sorry to interrupt. When's the next meeting?
Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, the next meeting of the Cabinet will be after the election on the 8th of June.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
I think that's the day I'm going for my second vaccination. Yeah.